All right, guys, we are here with Rose Vanden Enden, and she is the founder of Life Journey Enterprises, where you are seeking to find your divine potential, right? She does intuitive classes and workshops. She's been the author of numerous books. She authored Merlin's Raven, it's a romance novel, which is always interesting to me. Ask a Medium, Metatron, Invoking the Angel of God's Presence, and then So You Want to Be a Medium, down-to-earth guide, which is kind of nice because there are some people that are definitely not very grounded. And it's nice to have some grounding once in a while so that we can really see the truth in our lives. And then we can look higher than that. So she also did a couple talks at Victory of Light. She talked about spirit messages for everyone with a couple other people. And then she did the Wild Woman Circle, which is very interesting because I was in the Wild Woman Circle. And I know I have long hair and a beard. So people kind of look at me funny sometimes. However, it is a amazing way for me to understand women better because I'm a guy. And we don't always understand very well because we're very different, mentally speaking. And it's good to understand those things. And in an open forum like that, it's really great to feel that energy and to be able to share in that. And Rose was just wonderful in allowing that to happen, even though there were some questions. My fiance was like, "Hey, you got to go to this thing with me. I go to these women's circles all the time. You need to see what it's like." I'm like, "Okay, I'll go and check it out." And so it's always interesting because it says wild woman. But, you know, we all have, and we've talked about this before in the article that I wrote for the magazine. We talk about masculine and feminine energies, right? And we have both of them. So being able to tap into that, oddly enough, I did an oracle reading this morning. I was playing with this oracle deck, and the two cards that I got were woman and the moon, right? All of it talking about these feminine energies and really being able to tap into those emotions and those feelings and your intuition. So all of that is the feminine energies that go on in our life. So it's really interesting that today we would end up talking to you, who talks about that all the time. So give us a brief little introduction or a bio.
Oh, well, thank you, first of all, Jeff, for asking me to do this. I'm really excited to talk to you, and it's a pleasure always to talk to people. Let's see, what can I tell you? You described what I do fairly well. I am a certified medium with the Indiana Association of Spiritualists at Camp Chesterfield, as well as with the United Spiritualists of the Christ Light Church, which is here in Cincinnati. The church has been around since 2000, I think, 2001. And it is something that, it's an organization that was founded by about 6 people, and I'm one of the original founders of that community of people. So as a certified medium, I do readings for people as well as demonstrations of spirit communication. So that is something that is part of my practice, as part of my spiritual path or religion, if you want to call it that. Although I prefer the term spiritual path, because I think that my path is a conglomeration of a whole lot of paths. I was born and raised Catholic, Roman Catholic here in Cincinnati, which is pretty common in Cincinnati. And I still think of Catholicism as one of my base traditions, that I come from. I've also studied pagan spiritual paths, Wicca, as well as Druidry and fairy tradition and Avalonian tradition and all kinds of different spiritual paths, which those paths really do focus on more of the goddess energy, and or the balance between the goddess and the god energy. So the balance between male and female energies. So I incorporate a lot of that into my current spiritual path, as well as my current work. I was a massage therapist for 20 years, so I'm also a healer, and I like to incorporate, I believe that the work that I do is actually healing work more than it is anything, because I believe that healing takes place on that mind, body, spirit on all those levels, not just on one physical level. So I still do a little bit of healing work in terms of when I do readings for people. A lot of people that seek out readings from mediums are looking for that connection with their loved ones on the other side, the people that they've lost. And that can be a really healing experience to hear from those people when they are able to come through from the other side, which is a great privilege and honor to be able to sort of, facilitate that communication. In the last few years, I've been very drawn, sort of, I've told people this before. I think that our lives don't move in a linear fashion. I think our lives actually move in a spiral. And I think that we often return back to things that, we've experienced before, but we're going to experience it on a deeper level. And the spiral just kind of gets deeper rather than it's, on the surface. So in the last few years, I've really been revisiting a lot of my goddess traditions, a lot of my spiritual path in terms of the feminine energy, the divine feminine. And I was lucky enough last year to go to England on a trip that was actually a very spiritual trip, and it was geared specifically to visit sacred sites in England that were especially prominent in the Arthurian tradition, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and all those guys. But what a lot of people don't understand is that tradition is very, very much sort of centered in the divine feminine and the Babylonian tradition of the sacred Isle of Women. So I was lucky enough to get to do that. And when I came and on that trip, I had a lot of spiritual experiences that really kind of made me realize that was something I really needed to focus on. Especially as I'm getting older. I've been doing this work for almost 30 years now. And as I'm aging, I think that that's also an important part of this whole process. As we age, certainly we become hopefully wiser, if not anything else. And so that idea of that goddess energy and how that affects women, and just helping women to sort of tap into that divine feminine that is within all of us, whether we're young women or older women, that's become more important to me in the last few years. So that was my impetus or my, reason for kind of starting to seek more of that out. And that's how I discovered the Wild Woman Project, which was started by a lady named Chris Maddox, who is in, I believe, New York, upstate New York. And so the Wild Woman circles are really for mostly for women. There are some circles that are open to men and to male energy. And then there are some that are exclusively female, just to have that environment where women can come together and not feel, that they have to do something different or perform in a certain way because there are gentlemen present. And again, that spiral energy goes back. I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. And when I was in high school, I was very free. A lot of people think Catholic school, oh my God, you must have been so oppressed, and I'm not going to say that Catholic school was not disciplined, because it was, but my school was very much about empowering young women and letting young women know that we could do anything that boys could do. Just because we were girls, it didn't mean that we couldn't be good at math or science or do sports or, the things that are generally thought of as men's sorts of things. So again, I'm sort of rediscovering and deepening that connection to the idea of the feminine energy being strong and having gifts to offer that are really valid and important in our world. And, the whole Me Too movement that's happening now is really I think, it is happening because of this resurgence of energy, on a spiritual level, the divine feminine energy that is, present in our universe in some ways, saying, hey, we need to pay attention to this, and we need to pay attention to the both genders, in both experiences, in a really loving, compassionate, and empowering way. So, so that's kind of me in a nutshell. Yeah, that, it probably took, how long did that take? About 18 minutes to explain myself to people. But
what's really interesting about all of that is we get to come together as, people. And, just to give a little bit of background on my history, I grew up Catholic as well.
Mm-hmm.
I pastored in a church for 10 years as an associate. I was a youth pastor before that. And now moving into learning about all kinds of other traditions and spending time really diving into some of that and broadening my own spectrum into understanding these things. I am now, oddly enough, positioned where I see this rediscovery that women are having right now of who they are and the strength that they have, and being able to stand up and say, no, this is not okay. And being comfortable with that, I think, is a beautiful thing. And I get to be on the other end of that and work with men who need to have an awakening and realize that what we have been taught, the things that we've gone through our entire lives, take us away from being able to honor the people that are around us. And until we're able to do that and really give that love and that compassion and that honor to those people, we will continue to have problems and we will continue to struggle, because we are not taking the time that we need to be awakened to those issues that are going on in our society right now. So I get to attack it from the other end and really work with the men who are just, they don't understand that everything that we've been taught is counterproductive to that. So, whereas we grow up and we're taught that, you shouldn't have emotions, you should never cry. Well, then when we're dealing with very intensely emotional and empathic women, we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to handle them. And our answer is, oh, just shut up and, be quiet. Well, that's not okay, right? So we need to figure out how we can open up to our own feminine side, our feminine energy, so that we can tap into that intuitiveness, to those emotions, to those feelings, to really be sensitive to those people that need us there and need us to honor them and to support them, because that's ultimately what we were created for, to support and to protect. And that doesn't mean that we need to be super masculine and, go slay a dragon. It doesn't have to be like that, right? It's just supporting and creating space for those other people in our lives that deserve it, and not, my dad. I love my dad. My mom and dad got divorced probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And ever since then, my dad has lived with me. I took him in. He's 71 years old. His health is not good. He can't live on his own. So I take care of him, and I love him to death, but he's 70, right? So I get to see all the incredibly bad habits that men have every single day. Like, my dad is a perfect example. We'll go out and he'll make comments about women, and I'm like, Dad, you can't say that. Like, that's not okay. The way that he views relationships is completely different from what I tell people to do, because he's like, it's just amazing the difference in the generations, right? And how we've progressed and how we view other people and how we honor them. And I get to be in a unique position where I get to see that generation gap every single day, and I can help people move through that. Just as you're helping women really claim who they are and be able to stand up for themselves, I get to help men reshape their thinking so that they can understand where they need to be, so they can stop getting themselves into the trouble that they've been getting themselves in because they can't control themselves. Like, stop. It's okay. Breathe.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think it's great, Jeff, that is something that you're focused on. And I think that's what we all need is for all of us to sort of have that understanding of, gender, we are different, but there's pieces of there's pieces of that inside of us. There's a masculine side to our feminine nature, and there's, the opposite. I think it's funny. I mean, I'm laughing about the stories about your dad simply because I can totally understand that. My dad passed away a few years ago, but I actually live in his house. This is his house. And, he was in his 80s when he passed. He was born in 1930. So he had a very, very conservative view of the world. And it was, my mother passed a lot earlier than he did. And so it was sort of a challenge for myself and my brother to get to know my dad, because he came from a generation where, yeah, I have children, but they're not really my responsibility. I'll just pay for them and, I'll make the money so that they can live. And that's my contribution, and he was very good at that. But he was not as sensitive as a lot of, people would like our parents perhaps to be. So I think it's wonderful that the younger folks today, and I make myself sound like I'm so old, I'm 50, but, there's the younger generation that is behind us. I really believe I have twin boys that are 22. And it's amazing to me to talk to their friends. And, my generation was very open-minded, I think, and I come from a very open-minded generation. But the younger generation now is so much more fluid about things, and they're very accepting of each other in a lot of ways that I think is just brilliant and beautiful. And I'm hoping that continues, and that trend continues,
Yeah, it's incredible. We went from, our parents, right? When, my dad, your dad went from, a time where if you were gay, they beat you down in the streets and ostracized you from society, right? Yeah. And we live in a place now where it is maybe not completely, but it's pretty widely accepted that people are of all kinds of sexual orientations, and you do your thing, I'll do mine. It's not a big deal. In my dad's day, I hear this all the time that, if you were to see two guys kissing, they beat the hell out of them, right? Mm-hmm. So now you see that, and it's like nobody bats an eye. It's not a big deal. It's amazing to be able to live in a time where we're much more widely accepting. Of course, there's still pockets. You get into Southern Kentucky, and there's none of that, right? Like, right. This is just 10 years ago. I worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice, and I went into I was driving down into Southern Kentucky for a meeting that I was going to, and I was driving back at night, and I pulled off this and stopped at this convenience store. And now I'm not exactly black, right? So, but I look ethnic enough that they had trouble serving me. Mm. This is less than 10 years ago, right? So there are pockets of our society that are still that way, that cling on to those things. But by and large, the mentality is changing. And that's a beautiful thing to see. 50 years ago, we still had, white and colored bathrooms, right? Mm-hmm. And now, we don't even think about that. I go down, it was incredible. I went to Asheville a couple weeks, about a month or two ago, right? And I love Asheville. Every restaurant you go into there, every single restaurant, every place of business have gender fluid bathrooms, right? Yeah. And it was so neat to see the signs up on the wall, like, and they were very, very open about it. Like, anybody can use this restroom. It's just a bathroom, right? Mm-hmm. It's, it's not man, it's not woman. It's just go and use. Right. And it was really cool to see that in a city that I wouldn't necessarily think of as super progressive necessarily, mm-hmm. but it is. They are very accepting of the people that come there and the people that are in their society. And that's amazing to see that it is coming in, because, as we all know, it tends to start at the coast and work its way into the middle of the country, all those ideas. And I'm glad to see that in the middle of Asheville, North Carolina, they are very progressive in really tapping into the society and that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, I've been to Asheville as well, and I think it's a wonderful place, and I'd love to go back more often. It is, and it is, it's interesting because people talk to me about Cincinnati, and Cincinnati used to be a very, very conservative city. And I think I've lived in Cincinnati most of my life. We lived on the East Coast for about a year or so when my husband was receiving his graduate degree. We lived in Boston. But when we came back to Cincinnati because we wanted to raise a family, and it was a lot less expensive in the Midwest to live and to raise a family. And we wanted to be near our family, to have our children. But, when I first started in the metaphysical community or in my metaphysical studies, there was nothing in Cincinnati. And if there was, it was kind of hidden under a rock. You had to really work hard to find, an astrologer even. I mean, and astrology has been around for years and years, and everybody equates astrology with, a lot of metaphysical things. But when I first started studying this path, whatever this path is, it was very difficult to connect with people, and to connect with anybody who wanted to have the same experiences. And now the metaphysical community here in Cincinnati and in the tri-state area is gigantic. And it's I think a wonderful representation of lots of different people from lots of different places and paths and experiences. But it also, I think, speaks to the idea that people are looking for other ways to connect to their own spirituality and other ways to connect to other people. The Victory of Light that you mentioned, where you met me or saw me, that started as a teeny tiny little experience, basically in the basement, not the basement, but in the bottom, rooms of a hotel. And the first time I did that festival many years ago, there were probably 5 vendors and maybe 10 psychic people, and that was about it. And it was very small. And now it's become this huge event where people come from all over the country to speak and to present and to be vendors and things like that. But it also, I think, speaks to the idea that our city in general, and the surrounding outlying areas of Cincinnati, have become more open. And people are seeking things. They really are asking questions and are interested in, expanding their own understanding and expanding their own experiences. So I'm really thrilled that I live in this place. People will ask me, well, oh, you live in Cincinnati, it's so conservative. Isn't that weird? And I actually don't think it is. I think it's, I do think that one of my jobs, if you want to call it that, in my own life path, is to educate people. I have a degree in education. That's what I studied to do in college. Now I'm not teaching theater, which is what I studied to do, but I am teaching a lot. I teach a lot of classes in my practice. We help people make their own connections to spirit, and so I think that education and helping people to find their own way is part of who I am, but it's also, I think, becoming a larger focus for people. They want to be a part of something different. They want to be a part of something personal. And sometimes I think that in the larger sort of mega churches and some of the larger religious experiences and things, people lose that personal connection, and they're seeking that. That's what they really want. So
yeah, I think we all strive for experience, right?
mm-hmm.
There is an experience that we're seeking, whether it's that those goosebumps that we feel when we're doing a certain thing, or because ultimately we learn by experience, by the things that are going on around us. A lot of times it's a shame that has to be challenging for that to happen. I know on a personal level, I do crazy stuff all the time. just because I need that experience, right? I need to stretch myself, to really get out of my comfort zone so that I learn and I grow. It's just my personality. I tend to be pretty extreme. So I go from one extreme to the other. But, you know, I spend time. One of my own personal biggest regrets is that I never got involved in the military. I wish I would have. I would have been very successful at it. But I didn't realize I was young and dumb. And I thought that if I did that, you know, nobody could ever tell me what to do, right? Because I was such a strong personality. I was like, I can't sit there and listen to anybody. And then I realized, as I started doing these endurance events and these military style events, that there's a lot of freedom in somebody giving you one task. You know, you have one task to complete, you do this one thing and you continue to move forward. You know, life isn't like that. Life throws 1,000 things at you at once and asks you to figure it out. And then you have a choice which one you're going to focus on first. I was just reading Joe DeSena's book, The Spartan Way. And one of the things he talks about is Eisenhower's method of the 4 quadrants, where, you know, whatever's most important to you, that's what you work on first. Then you look at the second thing, the third thing, and then the last thing is what you're just going to get rid of altogether. Like, I could sit there and watch 4 hours of TV today. I should probably get rid of that and do something else, like go work out or read a book or, you know, whatever that is, and really prioritizing your life to do what's most important. And I don't know where I was getting with that, but there you go. Still there? Uh-oh. Hello?
Uh-oh, there we are.
Okay.
There. Yay, you're back.
I was like, what happened there?
It's all right. We just had a little Frozen moment there.
Yeah, it's okay. We all like Frozen as much as we hate that song now. It's because it's played a million times. But I was at the holiday night of lights over at Coney Island this last week, and my fiance and her son were in the car, and they started playing that Frozen song. Oh. Yeah, he was he was not happy about that. He was like, "Turn the radio off." Anyway.
That's funny.
So
I see you.
You mentioned
whining again. Hello.
That's
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
We all need attention. Aww.
Oh well, he definitely needs attention all the time. Constant. Anyway, go on, please, Jeff. I'm sorry.
So you teach a lot of classes.
Yes.
And the goal of that is finding your divine potential. So give us some insights on how to do that.
Oh gosh, insights on how to find your divine potential. Well, I think the first thing to do is to recognize that we all have divine potential. And, you know, I think sometimes the recognition of that is actually what I'm hoping to teach people. Because sometimes, you know, it's a lot of us come from backgrounds where, or at least in my experience, a lot of the people that I work with come from backgrounds that make them feel, for whatever reason, that they can't accomplish something, or that they are in, this is your box and this is the box that you have to live in, and this is the, you know, the role you've been assigned, or whatever, however you want to think about that. And to me, what I've learned over so many years, even from my Catholic education, was you don't have to be in a box. You know, the box is there. If you want to be in your box, go right ahead. I'm not going to judge your box. But if you want something different, or if you want something more, then you have the opportunity, you have the divine potential to create that. And I believe very much in you know, the idea of co-creating with spirit, co-creating with the universe, and the idea that, you know, the universe is infinitely abundant and we can tap into that. It doesn't mean that we're greedy. It doesn't mean that we, you know, are, you know, only interested in our own self. But there's a part of that that really speaks to the idea of worthiness, and the idea that as a human being, I believe very much that we all have that divinity within us, or else we wouldn't be human beings. And one of our challenges in this lifetime individually is to figure out what within ourselves we are needing to learn and needing for our own growth. So when I talk about divine potential, I like to help people understand that it is there. You do have it. And sometimes that's about just helping people to get out of old ways of thinking, or to break old patterns of thought and belief systems that hold them back in whatever way. And once that sort of hurdle is overcome, or at least it's to a point where they can start to overcome it, then, we like to, talk about things like, what is my potential and how can I make that more prevalent in my own life? What kinds of things can I do for myself? And to me, those things include things like, meditation, which is about that whole your own inner life. I believe that when we talk about divine potential, we talk about the idea that the divine, God, the universe, infinite intelligence, whatever it is that you call that higher power, that we have access to that all the time because we have that divine spark, that divine connection within ourselves. So meditation and prayer work, contemplation work, those kinds of things help you to go within so that you can make your own connection to that little divine voice that we all have. And that's, mediumship is a part of that. I don't believe that everybody who comes to my classes, wants to be a professional medium. And I certainly don't expect that that's what everybody wants. But I do believe that a lot of people are seeking their own connection to spirit. And that is one of the things that we try to focus on in a lot of the classes that we offer to people, is how do I make those connections for myself? And then we sort of build on that for people who are more interested in deepening those connections and then perhaps using them for other people, to help other people with things that they're working on. So that's what I tend to focus on in terms of divine potential. And
so I think it's really, personally in my own life, it's been interesting because I grew up, my mom was crazy and and pretty abusive. And, growing up that way, there were a lot of mindset issues that I had. When I was in high school at my senior year, I got straight A's my first marking period, right? And that was the first time I had ever done that in my whole school career, I guess. I did that, and the first thing that my mom said was, well, he'll never do that again.
Oh.
Because he's never going to be anything. He's always going to get himself in trouble. So, it took me a long time to deal with that. And, I got straight A's the rest of my senior year, but it took me a long time to really deal with this idea that I was never going to be any more than what I already was, and that I could have more. So it really did. It held me back for a long time. And I struggled with that. I struggled with, doing these events and realizing that the reason why I was doing it was to prove to everybody else and myself that I could do more than anybody ever thought I could, right? So I made it to the highest achievement in endurance events, right? I did all those things really to feed my own mindset issues. And then moving out of that, I had to come to a place where I had to realize that, you know what? I can have anything I want and I desire to have. I just have to take the steps and do the work to get there. Right. And I think that is that's some of it. And the other part of that is that it continues to come up, right? There are certain areas of my life where I'll notice, that old thought is cropping back up and I need to deal with that. But there are so many people that are not aware enough and they're not self-aware enough to understand those things. And I think that's a lot of times where we come in to really help show those people, like, listen, this is that same old bullshit story that you're continuing to tell yourself, right? It's the same thing. You dealt with it before. You can deal with it again. and you just need to move forward. And then I think it's great that you're offering those tools to get people to continue to move in that next direction. Because I think that that is the full circle, right? We experience these things ourselves. We learn how to deal with them. We move past them. We get around these obstacles. And then we come to a place where it's time for us to now become the teacher, right? And help other people deal with those things. And I think, that is the cycle, that spiral. As we get deeper and deeper into ourselves and we learn more and more about how we work and how we grow and how we connect, then we can start helping other people that haven't gotten there yet. Right. And I think that's incredible.
Yeah, that's exciting. And it's exciting. It's wonderful. My work, it really and truly, I get to see so much. It's not easy all the time, but I get to be a part of so much healing that happens for people and realizations that happen and just wonderful moments of discovery for people. That's what feeds me. And that's what allows me, when I'm having one of those days where I go, oh, that was really hard, or that was really, that was hard today, that I can look and see, oh, well, there is something that has come from that's really beneficial to someone, and even if it's just a really small thing, that's to me why we're here for each other, is to help us, to help each other figure this life out and to support each other. Ram Dass said, we're all just walking each other home. And I love that expression because I think that it's so true in so many ways. We don't think about life all the time as a walk home, but that's kind of what it is. And it's certainly not always easy. And some of us have lots of, boulders and things in our path as we're walking. But if you have someone there to walk with you, I think it makes things easier and better. And so to me, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, if you want to use that term. And I've been very grateful to have other people in my life who have walked with me and shown me ways around boulders and things too. So to me, it's you're giving that back in a lot of ways.
I think
the way to do.
Boy, I think that is that kind of circles right back around to the whole idea of these these circles, right? Mm-hmm. So we have these people that can help us walk through life. We get to do it communally together because ultimately we're all communal beings, right? Mm-hmm. Men are the ones that sometimes really struggle with that and walk away from that. Women seem to have a much easier time relating to one another and really connecting that way. And as men, we've been taught, you got to be the strong, silent guy, and you got to be off on your own, and you don't need anybody else's help, mm-hmm. which is ridiculous, right? One of the things that doing these long, crazy endurance events that I had to realize is that it is impossible to get through life alone. It's not possible. You can't do it safely and healthy. If you try to do that, you're going to end up having all kinds of issues, and it's not going to be safe for you. So, right. Walking through and doing these events and really leaning on these other people to help you make it through this, because there is always going to be a time in life where we're going to struggle and we're going to break down, and we need that support from other people to carry through that event or carry through that moment in our lives. In events, it's a very physical thing when I'm doing that. We're hiking, 15 miles at a time with 70, 80 pounds on our back, and everybody at some point is going to get tired, right? They're going to need help. They're going to need encouragement. But it's no different than life, right? We're all going to get tired. We're all going to struggle. We're all going to have moments that are more difficult than others. And we need those people in our lives that can support us, that can uplift us, that can help us continue moving forward and give us some guidance in those times. Because, even with myself, in business, there are times when I struggle, that I sit there and I wonder, oh my God, why do I even think I can do this? And then my fiance reminds me, look at all the stuff you've already done. Look at all the people that you've already been able to help. Why is it that you think that you can't help anybody else? And it is those moments of weakness where we can really find growth in our own lives if we're aware enough to see it.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think it's important for all of us to recognize that even people who are in the business, quote unquote, if you want to call it a business, of helping others, or in a service profession, or in a ministry profession, whatever that might be, we all have those moments too. It's not all like, woo, we're just like floating on a cloud because we're enlightened and, all this stuff, we're having those experiences as well. But that's what deepens our work. And I think that's what deepens our compassion and our understanding and our ability to, hold space for someone else who might be in the same position that we were in maybe, a month ago or 2 months ago or 10 years ago or whatever it is. But I believe that the universe brings those people to you too for a reason, because you have had those experiences. And